How do you remain sovereign? How do you remain upright? How do you not abandon yourself? Because we are
Yes.
all pros at some level
Yeah.
in self abandonment.
Yeah. Hey,
Howdy do.
howdy do. What say ye, Lindsay James?
Oh, yeah. What say ye? I am just so excited to be back here with you. It's always
Yeah.
such a good time.
Yeah, I'm so excited too. So I'm Kris Prochaska. This is Lindsay James, and hey, and today we want to talk a little bit, kind of a meta conversation, but also a conversation around co-creation.
Yeah.
And how do we stay in our own centered place when we're co-creating with others, and whether it's a business or a relationship or a client that you're talking to. Really, this is for anybody who is having to negotiate and navigate what it's like to keep your voice in the context of co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you remain sovereign? How do you remain upright? How do you not abandon yourself? Because we are
Yes.
all pros at some level
Yeah.
in self abandonment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different degrees and different varieties at different
Yes.
times in our life. Different relationships are going to ask different things of us. But
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
Kris and I were really exploring what we wanted to come here and be with you all about.
Yeah.
And we are new on this adventure of what say ye.
Yeah.
Although we have been co-creating in many different ways and friends and colleagues for years, this is our first formal shared adventure where we are doing
Yeah.
things together. So we kind of have this curiosity of how do we make sure this stays truly collaborative and there's no power dynamics that inadvertently take over, no old behaviors, no fawning,
Yeah.
no just like, oh, it's fine. Yeah, whatever you want to do. But how
Yeah.
can we really be
Yeah.
in good relations and agreement about how we proceed with things? And I think
Yeah.
this is applicable to dynamics of all variety, right? It can be your lover, it can be your partner, like Kris said, it can be your child, it can be your mother.
It could be your mother. Oh, there's a whole
how are
nother
we doing
discussion.
that? Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We others and our mothers. I think what I'd like to do is just set the tone and the context for how this came about. So we were thinking about what are we going to talk about today, and um, my I had a recent family kind of an emergency and situation, and we will talk about that in the future.
Absolutely.
I'm still navigating it, and it's still feeling kind of tender for me. And so last night, Lindsay's like, "Hey, why don't we talk about that? This is in the field, and do you feel ready to talk about that?"
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, so she sent me that text last night, and I immediately had this like response and reaction to it. And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about that yet." But because in the past, in my relationships, anytime that I said, "This is what I want," or "This is what I need," I often experienced pullback or abandonment, or it was just not okay for me to hold that. And also, my tendency is to, or has been to, override that and kind of go, "Oh, she suggested it. That's what we should do," even though it's fresh in the field. And I did have the thought, I would like to talk about this at some time, and we will.
Yeah.
But I noticed that as soon as it came into, honoring myself and self care, that I started to see all these things pop up in my field around, "Oh, this is not going to work. I should just leave. What are we even doing here?" And even though I know you, and I probably of anybody in my life who I could have this real conversation and show up and say, "Hey, I'm feeling tender," and you gave me the out, I, it still came up for me.
Yeah.
And I sat with it. And what was wild is that the question that I have in my mind is this just me? Am I making something up? What's happening here? And really had to sit with that. And then this morning, just like being with myself going, "Oh yeah, I'm just not ready to talk about that yet." And then to be able to stand in that place, my capacity, where is my capacity today?
Yeah.
And then share that with you, which it seems like, I know we're not giving you the full context. It seems like that's not a big deal. Like, but I invite you, those of you who are listening or watching, is think about a context in your life where someone you love and someone you trust, or maybe someone who isn't that safe for you,
Mm-hmm.
where you get the text and you're like, what do I do with this? I'm not really sure. And I'm afraid to speak from my heart about what I want and need. And so that's really what we wanted to talk about today. And I'm curious where you want to go.
Well,
first.
it's fun because when she brought this up, I'm in the middle of my communion course, my communication course for couples, all about shifting the conversation so that it truly is communion, right? Where both people have space in the room to speak, to connect, to stay with themselves. I always say to them, the goal is to keep two people in the room, right?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of us who do have habits like vanishing or abandoning self or leaving the room or we may be avoiding the conflict, the difficult conversation,
or overtaking responsibility,
or we come in over, we try to fix someone, we try to make the discomfort go away, whatever version of it, right? We all have some role in these dynamics. So I was saying this is perfect because this is what I've been talking about with folks too. And these are, communication is at the heart of how we choose to relate to others, period. And the thing about relating to others is we also have to be exquisitely aware and in connection to the relationship with self.
Yes.
And so this was what Kris was bringing in, was that recognition that she was slipping from center and kind of losing that connection for a second. And those old patterns of behavior were coming up where she was just like, Lindsay said this, I'm just going to go in because she wanted this, and override her sensation that was, I'm not actually ready to have this conversation.
Yeah. So. And realizing that on some level, I don't want it to be performative. I want it to be like, what's really happening for me right now, and what's really happening for you. And in this conversation, and what are we co-creating? And, you talked about design a little bit, and I realized there was a couple things that came up too, is that you have your throat defined and mine is undefined. And oftentimes I feel a lot of pressure to talk. And so what happens for me is that will pull me into my shadow place. So pull me into this place of feeling like I need to just step up and say something, even if I'm not ready to say it. And in the past, that's exactly what I would do. Not in my client conversations, but in my relationships. And I had this thought today. I was like, if I could just record this on my own, it would be no problem. I could absolutely channel exactly what I needed and wanted to say. But that my leading edge of growth is to actually stay in co-creation and in relationship as I'm communicating. And again, I can do that with my clients. That just happens naturally. It's when I am in my friendships or partnership, and even with my parents,
at stake in a very different way.
It's
in
at
those
stake.
Relationships.
Yeah, right.
When we are in because we play a number of different roles: mother, partner, colleague, whatever, and different roles have different leading personas, different characters that know how to show up. And I think a lot of us, especially in service, I can't speak obviously for you or anyone else, but for me, when I'm in service, it's such a clear act of my dharma that Lindsay leaves the room respectively. And I am so present with who is in front of me that it's just a channel and a focus on the energy. So there's not a lot at stake for me because I recognize the devotion is to my client and it's not personal. But when we're in relationship with a friend or a partner or whomever, we have a lot at stake because it is personal.
Yeah.
And so I think this was part of the conversation too, is really recognizing in the different relational environments what is at stake here? What is my role here? What is my caricature or archetype, or how am I showing up in that? And then it becomes easier instead of just typecasting yourself.
Yes.
And, is saying I'm avoidant. Well, I'm not avoidant in a safe relationship where I'm invited in. I might be a little more avoidant if I have a personality that's more dominant, that tends to get irritated easily, or has a need to be right, for example. That might be where that old part of me really is like, well, it's just easier to
Yeah.
exit stage left.
Totally. Right, left, and up, down, and all
around.
ways.
We might be
Like,
whirling
bye.
dervishes.
Bye bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the other thing that's coming to me too is that talking about capacity, and that really it comes down to, are we increasing our capacity?
Mm-hmm.
And what's wild to me
Or
is
maintaining.
or maintaining, or just observing when our
Yeah.
capacity is diminished, and honoring that, and not having to perform based on that role. Like, if there's times where I can, I do have to set that aside. I am in sessions, and whatever's going on personally, I have to set that aside, and I do that, and I do it almost too well, so that then when it comes to, oh, I need to, like, how am I really feeling about what's going on in this thing outside of the therapy room? Oh, I can shove it down so far that I'm not aware of it. And then when it's like, oh, we're gonna have a conversation about, I'm like, oh wait, no, hold on, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And so I think that, again, coming back to those roles, is that sometimes we have this idea like, oh, I'm a mom, I have to always be on, I always have to have an answer, or I have to be in control. Or if you're a provider, that might show up also. Or if you're, again, in a co-creation, or you're in business, etc., it's like, oh, I have to downplay what's happening inside me because I have a role to play here.
Yeah.
And I think, and then that identity becomes a whole, like, identity around, this is who I am. I am a person who the show must go on.
Yep.
And as my capacity has increased, the paradox is that I'm more attuned to when the show cannot go on, because I'm not there.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So many of us, when we are under duress or stress or whatever version of compression might be coming in energetically, situationally, there is a coping mechanism that has some form of dissociation, or many forms, right?
Yeah.
Our mind might wander, we might go numb in the body, something is happening that kind of takes us from presence and also diminishes the capacity that Kris is talking about. And so I think more than anything, the heart of the conversation that we want to invite in today is, how do we stay when we recognize, how do we recognize as well when our capacity is diminishing, and how do we return? Because the foundation of being able to change a behavior is first to be able to notice it.
Yeah.
First, if we have not realized we left the building 5 minutes ago, and we are just over in that field over there running with the dog, and someone's talking to us, and we turn back to them, we're like, oh my gosh, I have no clue what you just said. I am not here. It wasn't until 5 minutes later that you finally woke up and were like, wow, I have no clue what you said. And so how do we catch that, and shorten that lag time between when we start to drift and when we are present? And I think first, I just want to throw in breath.
Yes.
For me, I know at this moment in history, breath work and everything else seems almost cliche and overdone, but
There's
if
a
we
reason why
can
it's important.
stay with the breath, this is my saving grace. Whenever I start to feel heat in the body, or if I'm feeling there is energy between something or within me, in a conversation that might be a little trickier, sticky, difficult, whatever you want to call it, I start to breathe. And the way I breathe is through the nose, just really oxygenate the brain, really expand it and send it through the whole body. And it slows me down and just kind of come back to the breath. So let's just start there. Any of you who are in a charged situation or start to find yourself approaching a conversation or a dynamic that maybe has a little bit of tension, start with the breath. Just
Always.
breathe.
Always.
Just breathe before you speak. Breathe before you begin. And the other thing we were talking about in the communion course the other day was really being able to recognize when just the reactivity in your body. Can you notice it? Can you name it? Can you work with it? Can you be with it in a way that allows you to stay with the body? And in communication with someone, Kris today, do you mind if I share some of our conversation?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So she was talking about her noticings before she even began the conversation. I said hello, and we're talking. She said, I want to share some things I was noticing, and these old things were coming up, and I was feeling this way in my body, and I was starting to have these thoughts. And so before we even got into the direct conversation about what she wanted to bring to me, she brought me her noticings, which allowed me to recognize, okay, I have a beloved here and a friend who is moving through something. So she brought me into that space of recognition with her, which was things were happening. I wasn't just firing directly from this place of understanding. I had to kind of meander through all the territories that were moving in me. And then she came to clarity through being able to share that. And I always talk to folks who are having this conversation around clarity or when to speak or what the feeling is, that if you don't have a succinct understanding about what it is, you're not there yet. You're not at clarity, right?
Yes,
This is when you're still
exactly.
needing to temper the flow of your breath and come back into the body, because when clarity arrives, it's always really, this is what I need to say. This is what I'm trying to express. But if you don't have clarity yet, it's because you're still moving through all that dysregulation of whatever variety.
Yeah, totally. And it reminds me of something that I've heard recently where it's like children explain, adults inform. And so when we are in like maybe a younger part of ourselves, or we're in that dysregulated state, or we're in that like, I don't know what I'm feeling something, then there's a tendency to explain or over explain. And by the time that I had gotten on the phone with you today, I was really clear that there wasn't a lot of words that were necessary. It was to say, hey, this is where I am. I need to, like you said, invite you into where my noticing is, and then here's my request. Because if I had just come on and said, here's my request, you might have been like, oh, okay, you probably would have just gone with it anyway, or asked some questions. But I think that's the other piece of it too, is that when we go to our partner, our whoever it is that we need to have the conversation, we also need to see, are they in a receptive state? Do they have time? I texted you ahead of time. I said, do you have time to have a little conversation before we start recording? I think that's a really big piece of it too, because sometimes when we are feeling, let's say, dysregulated, a little anxious, a little bit like we feel urgency, but we don't have clarity yet, then what happens is that we want to process with the person. And that's not a bad thing. And sometimes that's necessary. But sometimes what happens is that if we're like, this is urgent and I need to feel better. And so I want you to get on the same page with me. I need you to understand me.
Yeah.
Before we even have the clarity or understanding within ourselves. And again, sometimes that clarity or understanding is, I'm just taking a few deep breaths and I'm noticing something and I don't have words for it yet, but I want to be in the communion with you. I want to be in the conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with regard to processing, super effective tool for some people. Some of us are verbal processors, some of us need to write it down, some of us need to just sit with it in silence. I think first figuring out what kind of processing is critical for you.
Yes.
Because especially if we're talking about intimate relational dynamics, and I'm not just talking about your lover, but Kris and I have an intimate friendship. She's one of my dear friends. And so, really being able to, especially in those environments where people have high stakes and high desire to come in with us, being really responsible about that recognition about what your processing is. And doing as much of that on your own preemptively, unless it is truly something that requires a back and forth exchange because their role was a part of what needs to sift. But a lot of the time, it's that we actually just need to sort ourselves and, or maybe reach for a neutral third party who has nothing to do with the exchange upcoming so that we can sort it and then bring that clarity forward. And so I think being able to discern, where do I take this? Okay, I have this recognition that I'm feeling this way and I need support, but who is the right support for that?
Totally. I was actually just recording something about that earlier today, that I had this experience when I was in my 20s. And I'll just share that I was dating this guy. I used to call him my first narcissist. He wasn't, it turns out, but I used to call him that. And we were in the process of breaking up, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I asked him to leave. He was at the door, and he was like, he started laughing. He's like, kind of laughing to himself. And I was like, what could possibly be so funny right now? And he said, well, I just wanted to, he said, oh, I was just thinking I should ask you to flash me your tits one last time. And I was dear. Like, I know, oh dear, don't ever do that. And I was like, get out. And what was interesting was that I was in a functional freeze at that point. I was saying things like, okay, we're done. You need to leave. But I was completely numb. And I didn't know, it was like I was so shut down. So I'm like 24, 25. So I call a friend of mine, a male friend, and I was like, this just happened. And he's like, what the fuck? That is so fucked up. I want to throat punch the guy myself. And I was like, and his righteous rage was like, oh, it's okay to be angry right now? Yeah. Like, that is not okay. And I know this sounds crazy, as a therapist, like I should have known that, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that was okay. And I do that a lot for my clients. I'm sure you do too. Is like, oh, that's not okay. And so it's about, who are you going to and where are you getting, like, hey, I need can you tell me, what's going on here? Did I miss something? Am I like, because we're so shut down. And so it's interesting now, like even last night, I was like, is it me or am I making something up? What's going on? And what I notice is that all these years of building capacity through breath, through presence, through understanding what my own sort of signal sounds like, what my own process, what feels like in my body, I was able to go, it's late at night. I'm not calling anyone and I'm just going to sleep on it. I'm going to see how I'm doing in the morning and because something was moving, but I just could not figure out what it was. And then giving myself that time and space, so calling in a third, checking in is not always a bad thing. I think that can be really helpful, but you've got to figure out, who are you calling in? Is it someone who has your back? Is it someone who is very judgmental? Is it someone who, if you're like, hey, is this just me? And they're like, oh my God, girl, I have told you 20 times you need to leave that guy. Like that isn't necessarily what we need in that moment. Because then what can happen is that if we're opening up to that person, they may be like, well, I told you. And then you feel this obligation to step into their, or shame, or to step into their timeline for your process versus staying with your own timeline for that process. So I'm a big fan of checking in, especially if you're relatively new to this, like being present with yourself and kind of getting, checks and balances and your clients, I'm sure, check in with you. Mine check in with me a lot. And I think that that's a beautiful service. And it's all about, as the person who is reflecting, have I no attachment to the outcome of what this person chooses? If you're going to someone who has a point of view that's very strong, who has a lot of opinions, or they see, that, and you know who that is, right? Like everybody knows who that is. We know. And so don't go to that person.
Yeah.
Unless you actually really need the 2x4. Yeah. And I think the other thing I want to say about this before I hand it over and hear what you say is that, it's like, it could be a therapist, it could be a coach who has a certain point of view that is very, like it's very maybe one or two dimensions. Like they're, this is their methodology, and so they see everything through that methodology. Maybe it's parts work, maybe it's human design, maybe it's gene keys, maybe it's Enneagram. They are, or maybe it's always trauma focused. And again, none of those are bad, and they all have information. But if that person only sees it through that lens, sometimes what can happen is that you're like, oh, I guess that's it. And what that does is it locks us in and it compresses our awareness versus staying in the paradox and the unknowing and the uncertainty. And so it's really about being able to stay in the uncertainty long enough to find our co-creative and creative momentum. We're not managing everybody else. We're not even really managing ourselves. We're just like, what do I want to create instead? And I think that that's where the conversation for me when I came to you was like, this is what I actually want to create today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You had the clear ask.
I had the clear ask.
Yeah. And that's clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, and everyone has a unique environment for their community or who they reach for or whatever else. And we have addictions in this space. So start maybe paying attention to who you're addicted because they always affirm you, or I always reach for mom because I know she'll get in there and go to bat with me. Yes. And so start paying attention to why you reach for them and what the dynamics are that might be feeding that. So again, everyone different processing systems, but I know for me, and I just want to add to all of what we're saying, a pause is always a good thing.
Always.
Nothing is ever lost by taking a pause.
Never lost.
You can return in 30 seconds, you can return in 5 minutes, you can return whenever you're ready. So a pause is also one we want to add in there with breath and just awareness of what is happening in the body. But for me personally, in my younger years, I am one of those people who, like Kris was saying, my throat is very defined. I'm a verbal processor. I am a very open heart, wear my heart on the sleeve kind of gal, and always have been. And when I was younger, that was beautiful and also horrifying in some ways, right? Because I would open up to the wrong person at the wrong time, or I'd share too much, or some of the other things Kris was mentioning. And it took me a long time to really start recognizing, like, just because someone is showing interest doesn't mean they deserve my story or my energy. And they may not be wise counsel, like Kris was saying. And so probably about 10, 15 years ago, I established a new thing for myself called my sacred counsel. And I very strategically brought my dear friends who I knew, loved, and trusted, and who I knew would be able to listen without coming in on me, without just going right to affirmation.
But they would fixing.
None of it. Yeah, all of that. And they knew time and place, right? I knew that I could bring it to them, and no matter how much they loved me or whatever stake they had in the situation, they were the quality of people who could hear what I was saying and really be able to help me gather my focus around what was actually in there and see my blind spots. And so at this point in my life, and for many years now, I have my sacred counsel, which is very few people.
Yeah, small.
Kris is one of them.
Yeah.
And I know that whatever I bring, whatever territory I'm traversing, they will listen deeply and they will hear the nuance and they'll help me sort it and sift it without any judgment or projection or whatever else. And often too, what I have found to be very helpful, and I would encourage all of you if you don't already have this practice, but like Kris was saying, making sure people are available. But when approaching someone, before you even begin the blah, just, are you available? Do you have some time for me to share? Like Kris said, is it okay if I call you in 30 minutes? And obviously there are emergency situations, pick up the damn phone.
Right.
Totally. But in a situation that is not that, really reaching for the people, but doing it with graciousness on your side of things and just saying, are you available? And making sure they are. And that also helps assure that you can actually be met by the person you're reaching for, because they may not. They may be in crisis themselves, or they may be busy with a client, or they don't want to, or whatever it is. So that gives them the opportunity also to consent to this communication and this query with you. And so I think that's a big part of it. And once you get that, so the whole conversation being, right, how do I stay here? And if you do know when you come into a conversation what you're looking for, it's good to lead with that. They've given you consent now. So, hey, Kris, can we talk later? She says yes. And if I know I'm feeling low today, I really need an affirmation. I had something that hit all my insecurities and I'm feeling reticent to show up and do this thing I committed to. I really need you to just remind me of my power today and remind me that I can show up. And then Kris knows what I actually need reflection on, as opposed to be like, you shouldn't feel that way. She wouldn't do it that way. She would never tell me not to feel anything that I'm feeling. But if you do have an understanding about what it is I'm seeking, I need a little affirmation here. I need to know that you can support me in this thing, or I really just want you to listen. Whatever it might be, it's really helpful to set the stage for how that communication goes, and to also keep you in, this is my request, this is what I'm looking for, and I need to just be expressed in this very clear way without that energy of you coming in and then starting to dance around what I thought I wanted. So
yeah, totally. I think if helpful. And again, we want to acknowledge too that sometimes we're just fucking in it. You're in the swirl, and what you need is, can you help me? I'm in the swirl. Can you meet me in the swirl so that I can get grounded and clarity? So we're not saying like you have to have it all figured out before you come to that person. Again, use discernment. But if you can take that deep breath, take that pause and get clear, what do I need? It's so important. It's so important that really sets the tone for how that person's going to listen. For you, with you, alongside you. And I think so many times we don't even know what we need. And again, sometimes we just show up and say, I don't know what I need. I just feel off. I just feel like I don't know what it is. But just being able to say that, sometimes the clarity comes when we can just say, I don't know. And then you might get the hit, like, oh, I need this actually. This is what I'm feeling called to. Can you provide that for me or not? And then, just really being with whatever shows up and trusting like in the magic of it. There's so much magic in communion, in communication. I think there's so much, wait, I got to do it right and I got to say it right and all this stuff. It's like, no, it's just fucking be messy. Like, it's okay. Just show up. I think is really the key around all of that. Is there anything else that feels, I want to make sure that we kind of keep it relatively like precise and
well, I think what I want to say, because I'm thinking about it, and you're talking to women who are in the field of working with minds and speech and communication patterns and relational dynamics. So we have a level of understanding and sophistication just by proxy and learning and doing this work. And so I'm realizing that I want to speak to those of you who are like, well, I don't even know where to begin with some of this stuff, like a lot of what we said. I don't have people, and that is what I wanted to talk about, because I'm thinking kind of zooming, way back to the origin story that I was starting to infer about when I was talking about the sacred council. But
Right.
I realized, and just going all willy nilly and not really realizing the relational dynamics. I mean, how many of us have had, we really need to just lay it somewhere, and so we lay it somewhere, and then the person back starts laying their stuff and gave no breath to what I was bringing and offering and saying, can you please help me with this? And I failed to say, can you please help me with this? I failed to use discernment to recognize, is this person the right fit place to bring this to? Is this the right time? Are they available for it? What's their state of it being? All these. So if you are newer to like really observing these relationships, I would take a little time, maybe even grab a piece of paper and
Yeah.
write down your core people you reach for.
Yeah.
Who are they? Mom, sister, best friend, lover, therapist.
Coach, yeah.
And then just kind of reflect for a little bit. What kind of responses do I typically give from them? And start to just sort of sort your relationships and ask yourself, are these people that I actually want on my sacred council? Are these people who give me autonomy? Are these people who support whatever process I'm going through and aren't trying to rush me along or shame me for it, or just telling me to get rid of them and change this and leave your career and whatever it is? But are they actually helping you find that autonomy and sovereignty? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we're all going for. If we can stay in that pull, and we talked about it last time, but if you can stay here, if you can stay in your authority, and you have safe beloveds around you who are the ones that you sort through the sticky icky with, then you're going to do a lot better than if you throw yourself into the river with all of the other currents kind of trying to swirl you around, and you get stuck in someone else's eddy and all the chaos that can come. And that happens all the time. I mean, people, we bring something to someone, and then their story gets tangled around ours, and their projections are coming in, and then we're all like, what were we even?
Yeah,
were
and
we
then they're
talking
like
about?
trying to
What
fix
was
themselves through us and are attached to the outcome, and and that and it gets muddy in there. But I love that of figuring out who's on your sacred council, and there are ways to build that and to find those people. But start with who you know right now, and what are the places. I would also invite you to consider, what are the stories that you have around those people where you're like, oh, but they can't do this, or they can't do this, or they're only this, and trust your initial gut hit on it and observation, absolutely. But also ask yourself, like, is that my story? Is that my experience? Do I categorically feel unsafe because I didn't, when I, in my past, when I have expressed this is what I need, people left. So am I also projecting that onto these people and expecting that from them when I have all this evidence otherwise? That means it's yours. And when it's yours, then that's where you get to play and expand your capacity by just having the conversation. Hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need today. And then test it. See how that person responds. This isn't life or death. It feels like life or death sometimes, but it's not. I guarantee you, this is not. Because this is where the whole conversation started, was around death and life and death. And we're going to talk about that again in another place. It puts things in perspective. And again, because of our attachment styles and our relationships and our experience and any relational trauma, well, we all have relational trauma, it's just to what degree, and our capacity to communicate and how clear we are. Like, we're all learning this. Nobody comes in like fucking dialed in. We don't. None of us do. We have worked hard for this, and we continue to work hard for it every single day. And some days it's a lot easier and more flowy, and then there's other days where it's harder, and other people and relationships and dynamics where it's harder. And so we practice with our easy people, our sacred council, and then we keep expanding. Our capacity grows by opening the boundaries even more and testing our theories, testing things out. And so we get better at communicating by communicating.
Yep. Oh, it's the only way. The only
It's the
way
only
out
way.
is through.
Only way out is
Yep.
through.
And
For
I'll
sure.
just close here by reminding you that evolution is part of the design. We are meant to
Yes.
grow beyond who we were yesterday. And in that growth, everyone's pace is different. So as Kris was saying, we're all humaning together, right?
Yeah.
And we're all learning and tripping and falling and flowing and flying
Mm.
and doing whatever, but in our own way at our own pace. And sometimes in our relational dynamics too, one person is evolving at a rapid clip and the other isn't. And so those known and understood agreements in the energetic field and the relational field become really confusing and disorienting for a while. And so just like Kris said, curiosity, being curious and just kind of coming at it from that lens as much as you can too, bringing just the spirit of play and wonder and like, oh, this is fascinating how I show up, how they show up.
Mhm. Yeah, like
Oh, I'm growing. How do they respond to that?
Yeah.
That's actually a little threatening to them, or they are ecstatic about it and now they're coming with me. But just giving space for the human condition and the human experience to actually unfold the way it's
Yes.
authentic as you're still really devotedly pursuing staying with yourself and also creating people, creating that space and that safety for others to stay with themselves. You're not
Such a
asking them to
beautiful
come.
gift. It's such
Yeah.
a beautiful gift to offer that. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Communion.
I love it.
I love it. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks for being here with us.
Bye, everyone.